In the middle of the noisy streets of Manila, where jeepneys honk every second and children laugh while playing barefoot on cracked pavements, lived a man whose voice carried a dream. Ramon Dela Cruz, a 27-year-old tricycle driver with nothing but faith and a song in his heart. Every day he would wake before sunrise, drive his old rusted tricycle through the crowded streets and earn just enough to feed his mother and little sister. But when the sun went down, something magical happened. Ramon became someone else entirely. He would sit outside a small cafe near Cowell Church, where the warm smell of roasted corn and street barbecue filled the air. With his worn-out guitar and an old speaker that crackled with static, he would start singing, and when his voice rose above the chaos, the entire street seemed to pause. People said his deep tone sounded just like Elvis Presley, that rich velvet voice that could make even the hardest heart melt. He would close his eyes and sing, "Can't Help Falling in Love," as if the words came straight from his soul. For him, it wasn't just imitation, it was connection. Ramon had grown up listening to Elvis on an old radio his father left behind before passing away. Every note carried his father's memory. Every lyric reminded him of hope. Singing wasn't just a dream, it was survival. One humid night, while Ramon performed under the dim yellow glow of a streetlight, a tourist from Ireland stopped to listen. She filmed him on her phone, mesmerized by his voice. She posted the video on YouTube with the caption, "This Filipino sings Elvis better than Elvis." Overnight, the clip exploded. Within days, millions had watched. International media outlets shared it, and comments flooded in. "He deserves the world stage and Simon Cowell must see this guy." Then, one life-changing morning, while Ramon was polishing his tricycle, his phone buzzed. The message read, "Hello, Ramon. We are from America's Got Talent. We'd love to invite you for an audition." He froze speechless. His mother, hearing his gasp, came running. "Mama," he whispered, tears in his eyes. "They want me to sing in America." That night, the whole neighborhood gathered, celebrating with streetlights and homemade food. They collected money to buy him a plane ticket. As he boarded the plane days later, he held a small rosary and whispered, "Lord, I'm not just singing for myself. I'm singing for the Philippines." The bright lights of America's Got Talent felt almost blinding to Ramon Dela Cruz, the humble tricycle driver from Manila, who had never even seen a real stage before. Standing backstage at the Pasadena Civic Auditorium, surrounded by giant cameras, glowing signs, and the buzz of thousands of spectators, his heart pounded like a drum. He had made it all the way from the streets of Manila to one of the biggest stages in the world. Yet in that moment, he felt like a small boy again, nervous and unsure. As the crew member waved him forward, Ramon clutched the small cross around his neck, the same one his mother gave him before he left the Philippines. "Go make us proud, anak," she had said. When the curtain rose and the crowd came into view, his knees trembled. The judges sat in front of him. Simon Cowell, Sofia Vergara, Heidi Klum, and Howie Mandel, their expressions curious but cautious. Simon leaned toward the mic. "Hello there. What's your name and where are you from?" Ramon took a deep breath and replied in his gentle accent, "My name is Ramon Dela Cruz, sir. I'm from Manila, Philippines." The audience clapped warmly. Simon smiled slightly. "And what will you be singing for us today?" With nervous eyes and a shaky smile, Ramon answered, "A song by Elvis Presley, sir. Can't Help Falling in Love." A few people in the audience sighed softly. Another Elvis cover, they thought. But Simon nodded. "All right then. Show us what you've got." The lights dimmed and the familiar melody began. For a few seconds there was silence. Then Ramon sang. His voice was deep, rich, and filled with emotion. Every word carried sincerity. Every note told a story. The crowd stopped breathing. By the second verse, people had started swaying and Simon's eyebrow rose in disbelief. Heidi covered her mouth. Sofia whispered, "Oh my God." And Howie looked shocked. This wasn't just an Elvis impersonation. This was something real, something heartfelt. The soul of the Philippines poured out in his voice. When Ramon finished the final line, his voice cracked with tears. The crowd erupted, clapping and cheering so loudly that it echoed across the theater. Ramon bowed his head, overwhelmed. He whispered softly into the mic, "Thank you. This is for my country." Simon just stared at him for a moment, speechless. The kind of silence that means something magical just happened. For a few long seconds, the entire AGT studio fell into stunned silence. The echoes of Ramon Dela Cruz's final note still floated through the air like a prayer. The crowd's cheers slowly faded as everyone waited for Simon Cowell to speak. Ramon stood motionless under the golden lights, his hands trembling slightly. He had sung from the deepest corner of his heart, but he had no idea what the judges would say. Simon leaned back in his chair, eyes fixed on Ramon. Then, breaking the silence, he said softly, "Wow." The audience gasped, knowing that when Simon said that one word, it meant something powerful. He leaned forward again, resting his hands on the table. "Ramon," he said, "I've heard countless Elvis covers in my life, but what you did just now was different. You didn't imitate Elvis. You became Elvis in spirit, not in sound." The crowd erupted in cheers again. Ramon's eyes welled with tears. Simon continued, his voice more emotional than usual. "You sang with honesty. You made us feel the song. That's what true artists do. They move people. And tonight, Ramon, you moved everyone in this room." Sofia Vergara nodded eagerly. "I totally agree, Simon. You could feel his heart in every word." Heidi Klum smiled warmly. "It was like watching a dream unfold," she said. "You have a gift, Ramon. A pure gift." Howie Mandel leaned closer to the mic and said, "Man, I've got goosebumps. You came from the other side of the world, from the streets of Manila, and you just shook this stage. You're not just a singer, you're a story of hope." The crowd stood up again, clapping, chanting his name, Arman, Arman, Arman. The camera panned across the audience. People were crying, waving small Philippine flags, holding their phones high to record this once-in-a-lifetime moment. Simon smiled softly and said, "You know, I think Elvis himself would be proud tonight." Ramon looked down, covering his face with his hands, overwhelmed. When he finally spoke, his voice cracked with emotion. "I just wanted to make my mother proud and my country." Simon nodded respectfully and said, "You did both, my friend. You really did." As Ramon left the stage, the crowd's cheers followed him like a warm wave, a sound that would echo in his heart forever. The crowd's thunderous applause still echoed through the grand AGT theater. Ramon Dela Cruz, the humble tricycle driver from Manila, stood on stage wiping his tears. He couldn't believe what had just happened. Simon Cowell, the man feared by singers around the world, had praised him like never before. The judges were still smiling, and the audience kept chanting his name. "Ramon, Ramon, Ramon." Ramon looked around the hall in disbelief. The lights sparkled like stars, and golden reflections danced on the polished floor beneath his shoes. He placed his hand on his chest and whispered, "Thank you, Lord, thank you." For a moment, time felt still. And then it happened, the moment that would change his life forever. Heidi Klum stood up, her eyes glistening with emotion, and slammed her hand down on the golden buzzer. The sound of that buzzer roared through the theater. The audience screamed with joy as a rain of golden confetti burst from above, showering the entire stage. Ramon froze in shock. He covered his mouth, fell to his knees, and began to cry uncontrollably. The confetti stuck to his shirt, his hair, his trembling hands, but he didn't care. It felt like heaven. Simon stood up and clapped slowly, smiling proudly. "Ramon," he said over the music, "you've just earned yourself a spot in the live shows." The audience exploded again. Ramon could barely stand as Heidi walked up to him and gave him a big hug. "You made us all feel something so beautiful," she said warmly. "That's what music is all about."